Hi guys, welcome to another episode of the world famous podcast Beating the Press with your two hosts, myself Ty. We've obviously got the brilliant Chris with us as well today, who's always here. I don't know why I said we've got him with us today. We wouldn't have a podcast without him or me, so yeah, we come as a pair. Thanks for tuning in. Today we are going to continue our look back down memory lane, and with it being World Cup year, we've got to World Cup 98 today. Just got me thinking there. I was like, what are we on? The World Cup 98, the structure's going to follow as per normal, just go through just what we remember of it, have a look at the winners, some of the losers, and obviously England and Italy, because they're the teams me and Chris both support. So with that being said, Chris, I'll just throw it over to you. We'll dive straight in.
Yeah, like this was I would say this is my proper World Cup introduction. You know, obviously we went back through the last one, and England weren't in it in '94, and then I was a little bit too young for 1990. So this was my first proper World Cup, and the main reason I was looking forward to this World Cup were two things, and that was Michael Owen and Ronaldo. El Phenomenon, or whatever they used to call him back in the day. And before this podcast started, I went up to my attic and I tried to look for a poster that I had on my wall. I've still got it. Still got it from when I was a kid of Ronaldo number 9.
Was it from Shoot or Match?
Yeah, it was from, I think it was from Shoot, and it was like a pull-out poster. One of these days I'm gonna get it out and I'm gonna show it, and I had it on my wall up until I was about 18, and then girls started coming in my room, and then they were like, you know, what are you doing with that? And but yeah,
get those teeth out of my face.
yeah. But where do you start with this World Cup? It was so memorable. You know, you think of, you know, the Diego Simeone, but and Beckham, and you know what he came back to. But where I want to start is Le Tournoi. Le Tournoi was 1997, and that was the year before this World Cup, and it was the last time, I don't care what anyone says, that England won a major tournament. Obviously. For those of you that don't know, it was like a warm-up tournament for the World Cup, kind of like the Confederations Cup is now, and it was England, France, Brazil, and it was Italy in it.
I think it was Italy as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, Italy. So it was a 14 tournament. England won a couple, and then I think we lost to Brazil. But over the grand scheme of things in a league table type thing, it was a win for England. And what I remember was obviously the famous kits and all that, but Roberto Carlos scoring his amazing goal, and it just kind of whet the appetite for what was to come.
Do you know that Roberto Carlos free kick? It's the first time I remember football analysis. It became like a geometry lesson. like physics. How's it gone that far to come that far back in? And they got like scientists in and shit. Oh, like, this is never happened. Like, you know, we've got to do some sort of research on this.
But that type of free kick. Yeah, that type of free kick was like synonymous with, like, you know, you think like Jairzinho and all those back in the day. And there's not been too many free kicks that good since. No. Yeah, since
not with that technique. Not with that technique.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where the World Cup, it kind of whet your appetite for the year to come, and then you had the longest build-up going. We all know what it's like pre-World Cup. You know, you're having all the adverts, and I always remember the iconic advert with the Brazil team going through the airport, the Nike advert. Oh, Maria.
I'll try and get that in if I can get it without getting copyright.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, and it kind of gave you, it had all the build up. You know, you had the World Cup ball. It was in Paris. You know, and you know, you just had the Ronaldo when he was, you know, the up and coming, when, you know, he was at his prime, and I just remember those yellow, blue, silver boots, the Mercurials that, you know, I went out and must have bought like a £20 pair, but they felt like the best. They felt like the most legitimate pair. Yeah. And yeah, I was just so fascinated for Ronaldo, and that's obviously where the tournament started. It started with Scotland v Brazil. Yeah. And I don't know about your memories about that game, but I just remember Colin Hendry up against Ronaldo, and Ronaldo showed flashes in that game, but I don't know if you remember what the winning goal was. It was, I think it was Cafu. He kind of took it around the goalkeeper, and then the goalkeeper slapped it onto the face of one of the Scotland players, and it kind of like went in as an own goal, and that's how Brazil ended up winning the game 2-1. What are your first memories of the World Cup?
Yeah, I mean, I was like always Zidane's like one of my favourite players of all time, and that was obviously Zidane's tournament. It was a big thing. I got to find it was like Zidane and Ronaldo, and as we're going on. But for me, the moment was it was a Michael Owen goal. There's no nothing else. Do you know what I mean? It's the first. I've obviously been Liverpool fans, and he did that, and it was the first time I'd watched a player, an England player, because I was too young to watch Gaza, you know what I mean? Like, you don't really, I was 15, 16 at the time, would have been 15, 16 at the time, what, 98, yeah. And you obviously understand stuff a lot better. And I'm there and I'm watching it and I'm just thinking, that is absolutely special for what he did. He did something, and I think it was men v boys, but it was a boy doing it to men. Do you know what I mean? And he was like dribbling in and out and going past all those players. And I just thought, wow, that is absolutely some phenomenal. Yeah, and I remember watching it with my dad as well. My dad didn't know much about football. He goes, oh, who's this young kid? And I said, oh, it's Michael Owen. He goes, oh, it was unbelievable. So then obviously the Beckham sending off, and that was the game that sort of sticks in my memory. There was obviously the stuff before with Beckham's goal against Colombia as well, and how he went from hero to villain. And I think if we just sort of go back to the back, and I remember the biggest media frenzy at the time was when Gaza didn't get picked, did he? For Glenn Hoddle didn't pick him, so that was a big thing before the even tournament started. And Glenn
Hoddle was the manager, wasn't he?
He was, yeah. Hoddle was the manager, yeah. So, and I remember the team; they had a hell of a team as well. It was Sol Campbell was there, Neville, Beckham. Do you know what I mean? And Shearer and Owen, obviously. I remember Owen took over from Sheringham, didn't he? Because I think it started Shearer and Sheringham. I think, and then he
that was the thing that was I vividly remember the first game. I can't remember who it was against, someone like Tunisia or someone like that. And he started with the usual like Sheringham and Shearer, because obviously we came off the back of Euro '96, and we were, we still had a team that was, it was coming home essentially. So you couldn't really break up that two the way that they played. But yeah, Michael Owen was bursting through. He wasn't in Le Tournoi. So it was a case of, it was just like like an epic rise for Michael Owen. So he didn't start the first game. He came on in the second game against Romania. So Romania, they beat us 2-1, and this was a kind of like a period where Romania consistently beat us in tournaments. Yeah. And I remember it was Graham Lasso. He was kind of like he got bullied towards the end of the game, and they scored late on. But Michael Owen was the one that got the equaliser in that game, and it was a poor game. He came on within 10 minutes. He scored, and then he started the last game because we needed to get a result, and that was, I think, was it against Colombia?
Colombia 2-0, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and then you had I think it was Paul Scholes, and maybe it was David Beckham's free kick. I know it was David Beckham free kick, and that took us into the next round. And from that moment on, Michael Owen started, whereas Teddy Sheringham dropped to the bench. But
you just said what's your memory, and you mentioned that Tunisia game, and it's just come flashing back to me. That was the first time I've ever had. I was obviously at school, and on those massive TVs they used to roll out. They rolled it out for that game, and I remember Paul Scholes' goal vividly, because it just came and he's obviously killed it from the edge of the box, and he with his instep.
Yeah,
and I remember that, and I just thought, I don't mind World Cups, and obviously you get to do this instead of doing English.
I also remember the iconic David Beckham free kick, and he's like this, because David Beckham wasn't starting, if you remember rightly. Glenn Hoddle kind of had something. I don't know whether he had a problem with his attitude, and I think it was Darren Anderton who maybe started over him. I know Darren Anderton scored in one of the group games. I can't remember what it was, but David Beckham scored, and I remember him doing this on the sideline when he scored. And obviously that took us into the quarterfinals, where we were playing against a quality Argentina side. Now, if you think of the Argentina side over the recent years, they're very all over the place. They'd have a weak back, and then a weak at the back, and then they'd have a great front line. But back then, it was a very balanced team. Zanetti. They had a strong midfield. I think Varane, maybe Simeone, Batistuta, maybe Ortega, the likes of those type of players, and it was a very good team that a lot of people expect a lot of things of. And so I remember it being nervy. And I don't know whether you remember, certain World Cups, certain events, you always remember the location. And I'll always remember Saint-Etienne. Saint-Etienne, it always rings in my head Saint-Etienne, because that's when obviously the Beckham and Simeone incident happened. And I'll let you take over from here, actually. Your memories of that.
No, you've summed it up. I mean, we've jumped to that game because I think it's probably, we did say we're not going to go through structurally, but that's the one that, like, obviously sticks in your mind. And I remember the Argentina game, and the one thing that really sticks out in my head in that game was the commentator asking Kevin Keegan if David Batty's going to score the 5th penalty, as it's like, I'm like, what's he going to say? He's like,
would you back him?
Quickly, Kevin, is he going to score? What do you think? Was he? Yes.
Yes. And you knew from that moment he didn't get. But it's always the one that misses the penalty that everybody remembers. Do you remember who else missed it now?
Ince missed it as well, didn't
he? Yeah.
I remember it. For some reason, I've got a weak memory when I remember the penalty taken and shootouts. But if we just go back to that game, I remember Michael Owen obviously scoring the goal, and then that free kick Argentina scored. Unbelievable. But I remember there's been like document. Must have been quite recently. I watched one, and they asked Javier Zanetti. He said we tried it in training, but we couldn't get it right in training.
Yeah.
And then they get it right. And apparently the pass that they played through Zanetti wasn't supposed to go through him. But it's gone to him anyway, and he's pinged it in top corner. So
honestly, I was so mad at that goal, because I was like, of all the ways you think of the ways that you don't want to concede, set piece, England, any team hate conceding from set pieces, like corners more specifically. But that as a routine, it just seems like we switched off, and it was just a finish that he probably would never ever do again. But one thing I just want to close on with that game was Sol Campbell's goal. I must have ran all the way around my front room and kitchen. Honestly, I don't know if you remember. I don't remember it being a foul. I think I remember it wasn't a foul. It was a harsh free kick that was given.
I remember it. I was with you. I was obviously wanted England to win, and I remember that moment, and it was just like everyone celebrated. But the worst thing was the referee's just going to like play. And there's like a massive, it's like a 5v2 or something. And then I'm like, and then it went on. But I remember the other thing it's the first time I'm listening to the commentary, and I'm watching the game, and I'm getting really involved in it. Obviously, Beckham's gone off, and Shearer and Owen were taking it into, so they went back they played 4-4-2 and they went 4-4-1.
Yeah.
And Shearer and Owen were taking it in turns to play on the right. So he didn't want it, and I thought Horror was great because he didn't want to take either of them off, because they're both obviously a huge threat in different ways. And Owen was on the right, and then Shearer was on the right, and then even when they went down 10 men, Owen would just go on the road. He was getting snapped left, right, and centre. It was the only way they could stop him. And then obviously it got to penalty shootout, and you saw almost like as England, you're like down to you take penalties, wouldn't you? Mm-hmm. And then the penalties, and then what happened. And then
just for the young'uns. Tell them how good Michael Owen was in that World Cup. Oh. You think you compare it. Like, we didn't have it like that type of play for so long, and then we had Owen and then Rooney. But tell the young'uns how good Owen was. Michael
Owen won a Ballon d'Or. That was when you had players like Zidane, Figo, Ronaldo. That just gives you an idea of how good he was. He's up there with one of England's best strikers. His only issue, he had bad luck with injuries, and that is what stopped him being probably, for me, the greatest England striker ever. If he played fully fit from now to then, because he had everything. He won games for England, he won games for Liverpool single-handedly. He had that bit about him that other players just didn't have. I remember listening to a Carragher interview. I think it might have been on Monday Night Football, and he said to him, Michael Owen, one of those, he said, no, they were talking about the Premier League 30 years. And I said, which young player have you seen that was unbelievable? He said, Michael Owen is known better. He said, I used to run with him, and he said he used to firmly believe he was the best player in the world at 17. And he said, oh, let me at him, I don't care, I'm better than him. Do you know what I mean? He had that fearlessness about him. And then obviously, even when you hear him, his own interviews and stuff, and he's become a bit of a weapon now that he's a pundit. And you don't want that to sort of,
tar it,
tar his playing career and
sort of. So if you're wondering,
but he was just phenomenal. I mean, he was literally, he could do everything. I mean, the goals he scored, defenders were absolutely, they feared him. He had that one thing, pace, and he could finish both feet as well. He was just absolutely brilliant. Do you know what I mean?
Clinical, wasn't
he? Yeah, absolutely.
So next, we'll move on to we might as well do a bit of house cleaning and your team Italy. What do you remember about Italy's
I
tournament?
remember a lot about Italy. Thanks for bringing that up. So it was the first time I had gone. So I went. I was on work experience, and we went away for the weekend or whenever Italy were playing France, and I didn't know the score until the game had finished.
Uh,
And obviously found out Luigi Di Biagio's missed a penalty and they've gone out. And now I've got because we were in camping somewhere and no internet. No, we didn't have internet. We didn't have phones back then, so it was you have to ring people or find out on the news that when you got back, and that was my memory of it. And I remember going back and watching it and all those chances. You know what I mean? And France were lucky. There's no but France were against Paraguay, and that was that tournament had the golden goal in it as well. If you remember, I remember, so that's my memory of Italy going out on it because I was at camping trip and I couldn't find out what the score was until the game would finish, and all I can do is cry with Luigi Di Baggio smacking the crossbar and it going. And I'm like, yeah, we just 1990 got out, lost in World Cup semis, 94 lost in the World Cup final, 98 lost in his quarters on penalties. So Italy have had it pretty bad with penalties. So and then if we just sort of just talking about France, we just go back. I remember the Paraguay game where it went to extra time and it looked like because what you really wanted there was just I think we're just trying to fire alarm me there, by the way. That beeping. Just trying to fire alarm. Like, it works because I didn't put a new battery in. So anyway, so you got the France. They obviously gone through, and I remember Zidane obviously got sent off, didn't he, in the Saudi Arabia game early on in group stages, and then it got to knockouts, and Paraguay were obviously typical South American team, really strong, really good about them, technically good, and they were difficult to play against. France couldn't break them down just simply because they didn't have Zidane was the best player, that creative force. Laurent Blanc scored a goal in I think it was 118th, 119th minute, and it came to him, he volleyed it in, and it was just like the relief for the whole of the French nation. It was just palpable. You could feel it, even though we're not there. You could
pressure was unreal,
the pressure, and it was just like. And then Zidane came back for the quarterfinal, and I'm like, we had Gianluca Pessotto, who used to be his teammate at Juve, and man marking him. I mean, it didn't work out because Zidane still ran the show. Pessotto was a quality player, but Zidane was just not there. It was just unbelievable. And then moving on from that, they've obviously gone through, and then Zidane just semi-finals, you know what I mean? And then obviously they got to play Brazil in the final, didn't they?
Just to touch on something unique, which we may not ever see again, which I think we definitely should see again. You mentioned it earlier, golden goal. Explain what golden goal was.
So golden goal is from someone who's had a lot of pain with it. So golden goal basically went through once after 90 minutes. The first team to score wins the game. You're dead, you finished.
Yeah,
so if you score in the first minute, it's just brutal. It literally is next goal wins. Golden goal is next goal wins in extra time. That is all it is. But at the highest stage. And can you imagine how that felt for France? If it went the other way, you've obviously got. So France are probably the one team in my memory that have benefited the most from it, because they obviously had that, and then in Euro 2000 they beat Italy in the final with the golden goal, Trezeguet goal. So they've had two huge moments in the history of football, and then after that, Euro 2000 they binned it. They didn't use it again. Like, you've had enough.
Can you imagine these days with VAR implemented and it's a golden goal and it goes straight to VAR? That's something different. But I do miss that. I always thought it was a good idea. Maybe not so much golden goal because it is such a killer, but silver goal, was it called?
Silver goal was it where it's like extra time. So it's in that half it'll finish. So after 15 minutes it's finished. Obviously, second half it'll just go throughout to the end. So so it was just it's an absolutely. It is brutal. That's the only way I could put it. Being on the end of that, and there's no comeback. You just finish it. You know what I mean? Game's over. You're going home. So it's just.
So before we move on to the final, I just wanted to speak about some players that maybe stand out that wouldn't get the mentions because of the clubs that they're from. For example, Davor Suker. How good was he? He obviously was the front man for Croatia, and if I'm right in thinking that they just broke away from Yugoslavia around about
there might have been about 4. I think it was about 4 years earlier, but it was. So Davor Suker, absolutely, and the game. I'm glad you've spoke about Croatia. So Suker was just brilliant, and then I think he went to Arsenal after that tournament. So Croatia played France in the semi-final, and Suker scored first, so France had taken the lead. Croatia had taken the lead, and France were behind. And even if you look back now, the guy who scored the 2 goals to get them through, he was one of the best defenders in my generation, from what I've seen anyway. for him to score then, he was never a goal scorer. And it's almost like having Gary Neville scoring 2 goals for England. That is exactly what it was. And the player was Lilian Thuram. And his goals were unbelievable. I don't know if you remember when he chopped back on the edge of the box, left foot, curling into the other corner.
Curled it in, yeah.
I'm like, Thuram. So that was just, that was such, I mean, semi-finals just one of those, aren't they, where it's just absolutely brutal. I think Brazil played Holland, didn't they, in the semi-final?
They did, yeah. So that's a good thing to talk about. Obviously, that Dutch team, particularly back then, like these days, the Dutch team is getting stronger, but it was never at the strength that it was back then. You know, you think of was it De Boer, Rijkaard, Bergkamp when he was top notch, and then Jaap Stam. Van der Sar. They played. Was it Brazil? Yeah, you said it. You said it. Brazil.
He's lost on penalties, if I remember.
Yeah, right, I think it was Ronaldo early on in the game, and then Kluivert late equaliser. I want to say, and then and then obviously Holland are not. They're not. Sorry, Netherlands. They're not very good at taking penalties either, are they? They seem to.
No, they're not. They obviously lost in Euro 2000 penalties to Italy in the semis, I think, as well. So they've always had that little. I think with Holland and Spain to an extent until they got over that barrier. Holland, it was a big mental thing for them to get over the line. Whereas Spain obviously finally got through that, and it was hunky dory. But no, that was a really. The both semi-finals were really tight, you know what I mean. But then I think the 2 teams that everyone wanted to get to the final got to the final. Well, then I think the final in itself, I think we better go into it straight away because it was such a story. I think before the game, the story with Ronaldo and how you're going back, looking back now, and the stories that are coming out, it was the most dramatic final in the history of the game.
We don't know what even happened to this day, so I mean, really.
I'll tell you what happened before I quote you. So what my understanding is, and watching quite a bit afterwards, was Ronaldo obviously he wasn't right. He wasn't 100%. He had a fit or something like that. And, you know, it wasn't right. But because it World Cup, he had to play because Nike were getting involved as well. The sponsors were getting involved. So he's got to play.
Yeah. And this fit was the night before, wasn't it? It was
the
night before
and he wasn't right. And the team sheet went out without him. And then they went, no, he's starting. He's got to play. And then they'd rechanged it. And then you could see when they were doing the anthem at the start as well, he just went, you could see his face, he wasn't there, right? Do you know what I mean? And I was like I was a huge France fan because for years I hated Brazil because they beat Italy in '94 on penalties. So I just hated him all the time. I was not a Ronaldo fan. Obviously he was phenomenal, but I wasn't a Ronaldo fan. Zidane was my man. And I was like, so that whole drama before the game had even kicked off, that was just so, even at that young age, I'm thinking, this isn't right. This shouldn't be happening for major tournaments. You should know your players, you start. And we never knew at the time. Like back then, if you had Twitter, you'd probably know in about half an hour, but we didn't. And now, obviously, years later, stories coming out, you know, what had happened and how much influence a sponsor had on it and stuff. And I remember this is a video that came out about Le Boeuf, Desailly and Thuram. And they were talking about Ronaldo. And they were saying, when you mark him, he does this. He was speaking in French, obviously translate. He said, do the step over. He always goes left. He said, but if you let him turn, you're dead. Do you know what I mean? And it was like kids playing against. So it was just mad. But then I remember the game as well because he had Frank Leboeuf playing at centre half because I think it was Laurent Blanc injured, and he was tackling and getting the ball off Ronaldo, and he thought, if that is happening, Ronaldo's not fit. You know what I mean?
He's not on it.
Yeah. And then obviously we played the game itself, and then Zidane scored 2 unbelievable headers, didn't he? And I was just like, just like fist pumping him for fun. And then
that's the thing though as well. Like, you know, you think of, you said it best at the beginning of this part. You had the teams that everybody wanted to see. You had the holders, and then you had Brazil, who, you know, it's synonymous with the World Cup, and they had the best player in the world at the time, and everybody thought it was going to be Ronaldo's final, but because of what happened, he looked a shell of himself, and you know, even if you look back at the highlights now, you can still see it's so bad. But I mentioned it earlier. The one way that you don't want to concede is set pieces. You know that as a coach better than anybody else. Let me concede any other way, but set pieces is the one. And Zidane just out of nowhere, 2 pretty much identical goals from both sides, and they were just so good in that tournament. Like, well, maybe not so much in the tournament that grew as it went on, and in particular when Zidane came back. They were so well balanced. Every player just seemed like a captain. Every player was strong.
I mean, you look
And
at
even
that team. I mean, we talk about balance. That was an unbelievably balanced team. So if this is me going top of my head. So you got Barthez in goal. You had Thuram and Vicente Lizarazu as fullbacks. You had Desai and Blanc centre halves. You had Deschamps and Vieira as you holding midfielders. Then you had Jokev and I can't remember who was on the right. Zidane behind either Henry, Guivache or Trezeguet. The one thing that, if you remember from that tournament, and it was a huge issue with France, they didn't have a striker or a proper striker. So we're talking about, so we can talk about Henry being probably the best player in the Premier League. He wasn't that player at that time. No. Trezeguet wasn't that player at the time. And I remember Stefan Guivache starting a few games. And my argument for years used to be, just because you won a major tournament doesn't make you a good player, because Stefan Guivache won one for thingy and he was shit. Do you know what I mean? So they had him when they were playing. So the balance of the team was really good, and they never had that striker, but they had Zidane. And if that final, I remember he put an absolute masterclass on, and he was just like, there's players that make you fall in love with the game, and he was the first one who did that. And the issue with that I always find is, like Messi's a player that makes you fall in love with. Zidane's the one before him. So they're the two players in my memory, in my lifetime, that have made me fall in love with the game, in terms of the beautiful part. Maldini's my favorite, most favorite player. But Zidane was first, and then it was Messi, because they do stuff with the ball that no one else can do. I mean,
Cristiano also do it in their moments. They do it in the big moments.
Yeah, and they do stuff that you just sort of would normally do in the school playground, and then give it one of them. Do you know what I mean? So and they make you fall in love with the game. And that's a very special talent to have. And that's why I think those two are the ones for me, if we look back. And Iniesta later on was another one. It's just those players that have the ability to glide past players and make the game beautiful and pass it on. Always make the right decisions. And just,
like an art.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Then, so to wrap up the final, it just never seemed like Brazil were in that final, even when they went down to 10 men. France, remember Desai obviously got sent off. And then Petit ran away and slotted one away. And obviously, like you say, it was just like the scenes, home nation winning it, obviously everything they ever dreamed about. And it was just, it was well deserved, even though they did scrape through a couple of the games.
I remember that's what tournament football, isn't it? I remember at the time when they'd won it as well, it was a huge moment for France, because France is obviously, it was a divided country at the time. And to an extent, you might have it for a day, a week or something. You've got an Algerian immigrant in Zidane coming and winning the tournament for you. Do you know what I mean? A team that's half from Africa, that parents are from Africa and they've emigrated over and stuff. I think that was a poignant moment. And I always go back to, I say, sport's the biggest, most powerful influence in the world. I think it bypasses politics, and, you can really make some great movements and change people's views and get people on board and, get that direction of travel together. But I just thought that moment was quite a poignant one. And obviously, I mean, we've had issues, there's issues now, we've moved on, and now the far right sort of coming, but we don't want to go into political, but at that time, I remember that, and there was a huge, the reports were coming out and saying it's like huge, the south of France and Marseille and that part of the world where it's, there's a lot of sort of North Africans who live there. And that was a big moment. And I thought, it
influences so many different things, and and the great thing about the sport is that it writes its own headlines, and there's plots and subplots. If you think of this one, obviously you had the whole Ronaldo thing, and what sport allows you to do, in particular the World Cups of that genre, was allowed a big redemption arc. So now we're going to move on to 2002 next. I think Ronaldo might get his revenge in that one. You know what I mean? So it's So it kind of highlights the beginning of the Ronaldo, Zidane, Kaká, those Ronaldinho era coming into play. So that's going to be interesting. Next one.
I think the reason probably why 98 and there's more of an excitement from us, because it's stuff that we remember for these players that were starting their journeys, and we saw them for the next 10, 15 years. And, they really bought, I think for me, that's when modern football started, honestly, you know what I mean? And I think that's the way I see it. And these players that are now managers, and, the young ones probably don't see them as much and just look at your Cristiano Ronaldo's and your Messi's. And,
we say it all the time. It's the FIFA cards, the FIFA legends.
Those icons, they are the real deal. You know what I mean? And these guys, I mean, we're lucky that we've actually seen them play. And watch them on Champions League and World Cups and seeing the magic and how much joy they brought fans across the world. And then for us to now be able to see the newer generation, it's just, now we're watching them as coaches. So we always look at these players,
It's quite easy to get carried away and think about how good everything was in the past. But if you think back to then and you maybe compare it to now, you think of Ronaldo and Messi coming to the end of their careers, and you think about who out there right now is truly, truly a great in the game. Back then, there were so many different greats at that particular time, and they were all in the prime at that time. So yeah, it was an amazing World Cup, one that got a lot of fond memories for. So yeah, so as we always say at this time of the podcast, if you have managed to stay in, I think we're around about 30 to 40 minutes deep. Why not just drop us a little subscribe and join the 132 to 36 BTV army. See if we can get up to 150. And even if you don't do that, just like or comment at the bottom. Again, Ty likes to have a little back and forth. He's got plenty of time for that. Towards the end of each podcast, we like to do a question of the podcast, and normally the first one that gets in stitches the other one up. So this week it's going to be Ty's turn. So Ty, what's the question of the podcast, man?
Yeah, question of the day. You have stitched me up today, but I'm going to think fast. I'm going to think on my feet. Okay, so we always look back at these tournaments and the general questions is like what's your highlight? What do you remember from it? What stands out for you? But for me, I'm just going to be really simple. What kit do you look back and think absolutely loved that? And if they did that again, I'd buy it. So yeah, what was your favourite kit from that year? And would you love for that country to bring it back in?
I'm going to throw one out there, and I'm going to say mine was probably Nigeria. And we missed them as well. The Elise goal beating Spain and all that. But yeah, that's for another day. But I like the Nigeria, and I think it was South Africa kit as well.
Mine was Croatia. I always liked the checkered shirt. There was something about it. Yeah, it's crap. And I just remember that Davos Sukeren's one of me above, and I just think you just talk about these players and the names just come, and it's like I can go through the 11s. Starting 11s, because I was an absolute football. I'm still a football nut, but back then it was just like, know him. It used to be at school, and you on your paper you'd write out the team, wouldn't you? Your world 11, and you're like, this is Croatia's team, and you'd be like, this is before Twitter and tactics board and everything. You know what I mean?
So, and Chilavert. I've just remembered Chilavert, a goalkeeper that took free kicks and penalties. Yeah. Right, we can go on forever about this World Cup, but put your thoughts down below, and obviously. Go with Ty's question on the kits. That'd be great. So it's been a good one. Next one's going to be World Cup 2002. So obviously tune in. That's going to be a very memorable one also. All right, that's it from me. Anything from you, Ty?
No, that's a good one. That I think that we don't really plan it as well. We say, but then there's little things that crop up. But it's just great for us to look back as well. So I mean, have a listen, guys, and let us know your thoughts down below, because we do like doing this. It's the reason why we do it, but we'd like a bit of interaction and engagement just to let us know that other people are listening and watching it, even if it is a WhatsApp. Sam, Alex. All right, guys. See you in the next one.
Bye. See you later, guys. Subscribe.